Okay. Hello. Good evening, or depending on where you are in the world, good afternoon, good morning, good night, whatever. I'm Tad. It is now 7 o'clock p.m. Sunday evening, 1st of February, here in California. I assume many of you are also in California, and therefore you are already aware of what time it is. But for those who might be in other time zones, I just thought it might be interesting to pass that on. Anyway, hello, good to see you. I will be here for approximately an hour. I will be reading more from Sleeping Late on Judgment Day. Excuse me, just moving some things out of my way there. We'll be reading from Sleeping Late, as mentioned. Don't have a huge amount to report this week, as I said in the earlier reading, the 1 a.m. reading. I have finished Splintered Sun as far as it is now out of my hands until copy editing, which is post typesetting and all that stuff, or maybe they'd happen at the same time, but I get my manuscript back typeset with copy editing comments on it. So that's done. I've sent the maps off, or at least my squiggly dibbly maps. The ones that have to be polished. If I were still doing it myself, I would be starting a new map from scratch based on those maps, but instead I'm sending them off to Isaac, who is going to kindly make them into attractive maps for my attractive readers. And let me think, anything else? Just the usual. Dogs are dogging. They are fine. They are, as I think I probably have said 450 times in the last few weeks, they are, or however long, that they are not friends, but they're as détente. They are used to each other. Johnny accepts the fact that there is an unwanted new dog who lives in the house, who has equal right to treats and petting and all that stuff, although it took him a while to figure out that it was not just some grotesque, drawn-out April Fool's Day trick we were playing on him for 8 months or so. So they're doing okay. Deb is upstairs this time of the night. Of course, she is still awake, unlike when I do the late night readings. And other than that, not a lot to report. It's been, like I was also saying last night, I've barely been out of the house except to pick the dog up from doggy daycare because we can't possibly exhaust Lemon, and Johnny can't go on long walks, but he hates it when she goes out by herself with one of us. So we ship her out 2 days a week to somebody's house where they have lots of dogs visiting and dogs of their own. And then Lemon has other dogs that she can play with who don't look at her like she's insane, which Johnny basically does. But as I said many times, I totally sympathize with Johnny. I too am a grumpy old man, and I just really most of the time don't want anybody trying to get me to do something. In my case, it's because I have books to write, and writing books, for me anyway, requires a certain amount of quiet time, a lot of quiet time. That's actually most of my working week is spent thinking about what I'm working on, writing some, then going back to think some more, etc., etc. So Johnny, as far as I know, is not writing a novel, although I would love to read it if he did. I think it would be very cool. It would be like I Dog or I Hero of the Household or something, because for a long time Johnny seemed to be absolutely certain that only his barking at inopportune moments has saved us from death or worse many times. We actually had a barking incident like that today with both dogs going off, which was because of the way I had stacked the dishwasher. So I had stacked the dishwasher with a large pot upside down on the bottom rack, and the thing, the rotator, the whatever it's called, I can't remember the name of it offhand, but the thing that goes around and around and sprays water up from the bottom of the dishwasher was going through that upside down pan, and every time it did, it would make a shwonk noise, shwonk like that. And of course, the dogs were positive that it meant that, I don't know, the Visigoths were beating down our outer walls. Of course, we don't have outer walls really, but it doesn't matter when you're a dog and you hear Visigoths coming. So of course they were both and just insane. And Johnny's mostly deaf now anyway, so you can tell him, Johnny, it's okay, as many times as you want, and he doesn't care because he doesn't hear. Whereas Lemon is just at the age where she doesn't believe that you're right. She believes that there's something desperately wrong and only she knows it. And if it has woken her up, then she needs to bark at it. So that's been, my day today largely. That was the excitement of the day today. And big surprise, big shock ending. It was not Visigoths, as I said. It was the dishwasher, although I could never prove that to the dogs. Anyway, since I'm going to be doing a goodly amount of reading because I have so little to chat about tonight, I'm going to go first and see who might have showed up and said hello. And, I see Jeremy, my good friend Jeremy. Hello, hello, good to see you. Medardo Landon Mazadueñas is here. And as always, Medardo, a pleasure to see you. Ron, long time no see. Hey, buddy. Well, not that long, but long by my standards. Long by the standards of somebody who doesn't get out of the house much, so he doesn't see many people. Anyway, Ron, good to see you. Susan Chamblin, is there any update on the third Ordinary Farm book? Oh, there's a thing. I'll come back to it as I finish saying hello to everybody. Isaac says, I see a black cat. And yes, you do, Isaac. It is indeed a black cat. That is TJ. We have two downstairs cats. TJ, the black one, and PJ, the ginger one. And no, I did not name them, and I would have certainly named them something that would have made it easier to differentiate. But there they are. They were not my cats, although they have now been living with us and living especially with me because it's in my office for 2 years now. So and I do most of the feeding and changing of litter boxes and stuff. But I do not have renaming rights. So TJ and PJ, they remain, despite the confusion this causes. Anyway, Victoria Camden. Victoria, there looks like there's a C-A-M-N in your name, so it might be Camden, but I'm just pronouncing it the easiest way. Anyway, lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. Claudia War. Oh, and as I always say, Victoria, if anybody wants to tell me how to correctly pronounce their name, I'd be very happy to be told. Anyway, Claudia, hello, good to see you. Kristen, hello, that's Kristen Rule. Jay Sheckley, hello, my dear, good to see you. Jay is one of my favorite human beings and one of the world's true resources. I hope that any of you who are on Facebook will go check her page out and go see what Jay has to say, because she's always on top of everything and always has a lot of good energy for everybody. Let's see who else is here. Beth Kelleher, hello. Beth is glad the Visigoths held off. Yeah, I did too. I was too. It was a touch and go there for a moment when we were in danger of being invaded by armed dishwashers, but apparently we have survived the crisis. And Ron says, we have TJ, PJ, now you need a CJ. No, I do not need A, any more animals. B, any animals with confusing names that help to confuse me even more. Because, as I said, I am a grumpy old man. And the last thing I want to have to do is memorize new complicated names for new and complicated animals. We used to have 4 dogs and 2 cats. Is that what we had when we had 4 dogs? So in a sense, this is actually kind of a vacation period in our lives. Oh, okay, I didn't see this. Medardo. Okay, so who else did I miss? I saw Tracy, I think. Ray Weatherford. I didn't see Ray. I didn't see Tracy. Hello, both of you. Isaac, good to see you as always. Christy Sanders, a pleasure. Barb Ann, good to see you too. Medardo, I did not see your the rest of your post. I only saw the first line. I am so very sorry to hear about your dog. Oh, Mostaza. I can only say I know that pain. I know that pain very much. And I wish you and your wife well. That's so painful. It is so difficult. We just lost our last Chihuahua back a year ago. And it's still painful, but we still talk about all of our dogs, including the quorum of them that are no longer with us. So it is painful. I'm so sorry to hear it. Anyway, who else checked in? Susan Shamblin. Hello, Susan. Sean Toomey. Holiday in Cambodia. Aha, Dead Kennedy's quote. Good morning from Phnom Penh. Excellent. How exciting. I wonder what you're doing there in Phnom Penh. Because I didn't think that you were there before. But anyway, let me know. Okay, did I get everybody? Nope. There's more. Mark Marino. Hello, Mark. Good evening to you too. And Tim Speckens says, happy first day of February. And I send to you as well, happy first day of February. Anyway, so lovely of you all to check in. I always enjoy that. And at this point, I think I am going to move to the book and start reading. If I have remembered to leave the app open. Yes, I did. Okay. So where we are, what happened last time? God, that's a good question. Bobby began to get some information in from George, aka Fatback, about some of the Persian Americans living in the San Judas area, and he found one in particular, a woman named Doña Sapanta, because he's looking for the civilian identity or the civilian refuge for Anahita. And at the same time, he was realizing he did not want to be in his semi-haunted apartment anymore, especially not when armed right-wing lunatics knew where it was. So he has taken the two Scythians, the two Amazons, as he calls them, they call themselves, and has moved them into Kaz's old secret apartment that even Eligor did not know about, and sent them out to get some costumes, and that was what mostly happened in the last chapter. So I think that's enough to bring you up to date. So now we proceed with the story. Chapter 16, Letting It Bleed. One of those northern weather fronts had dropped down on us from somewhere in the neighborhood of Alaska. So as I drove across town, I kept the defroster on and the windshield wipers at full speed. It was a cold rain, and I would much rather, have been sitting in a warm apartment that still smelled like Kaz, although with the Amazons each taking 2 steamy showers a day, the scent was almost gone. The Tierra Green Apartments had the oldest, most pathetic water heater outside the third world, and its pilot light went out at least a couple of times a week. The women hadn't had regular hot water in months, and they were taking full advantage of it now. I was listening to Let It Bleed by the Rolling Stones, a nearly perfect album both for rainy days and considering the end of the world as we know it. Not that I was really planning to overthrow all of heaven, just part of it, one certain very powerful part of it to be precise. But even so, you can't always get what you want, and Love in Vain seemed disturbingly appropriate. I parked out on Parade along the waterfront, still hoping to keep my recently painted car hidden from prying eyes, and checked for people following me as I took a roundabout walk to the compasses. My fellow heavenly advocate, Cool Filter, was huddled in the doorway of the Alhambra building, trying to stay dry under the awning, but since the rain was blowing sideways, he wasn't doing very well. A silent protest against the unfairness of the city's smoking laws, I said as I walked up. Cool offered me a fist. We bumped. Silent? Hell, I've been bitching about it for years. But it doesn't make much difference when nobody's listening. Our true condition in this world writ small. He gave me a look. What's that shit mean? You know, we all work for shadowy forces, follow rules we don't understand, and when we complain, nothing happens. I don't know what happens when you complain, man, he said, grinding out his most recent cigarette in a puddle. But I know when I do it, I get my ass kicked by the mule. I liked Cool. He was a good guy, a straight shooter. My idea of an angel. Did you ever think that maybe it's all bullshit? I asked. Yeah, and it is. He paused and eyed me again. Hang on, what are you saying exactly? That maybe the folks we work for aren't as perfect as they seem. That maybe some of them are corrupt. That some of the things we're doing aren't just to help people or to bring glory to the highest. Cool laughed. Shit, boy, what's got into you? Our bosses aren't perfect? Some of what we do is bullshit and the rest is dubious? He lit another cigarette. I got only one thing to say to that. So what else is new? He let out a cloud of smoke. But it pays the rent. He smiled. In a metaphorical sort of way, anyhow. I left him there, huddled in the doorway, trying to keep the rain off his nice clothes. The thing is, Cool was probably right. Maybe all my coworkers, every angel in every city, had figured this all out already. Maybe I was just refusing to go along with the way things were. Kaz had called me a romantic several times, and it hadn't sounded like a compliment. The Compasses was about what you'd expect on a Wednesday afternoon. Some regulars and a couple of out-of-towners passing through. Pretty much every angel in the Bay Area knew where the good bars were, the safe bars where you could take off your halo and let your hair down, so to speak. I saw Jimmy the Table and several other familiar faces sitting at one table and Monica at another with Teddy Nebraska. Monica waved. I hadn't had much chance to talk to her lately, but Monica Neighbor is another one who falls into the category of good people. Even if, like me and most of my friends, she's not really a people. I let young Elvis corner me for a minute and tell me about what he'd done lately to his 72 Camaro. A bunch of upgrades which sounded flashy, expensive, and pointless. Just the way I like it. But having so recently put my beloved AMC Matador machine on the block, I wasn't really in the mood. I begged off with the excuse I needed a beer, which had the advantage of being true, then made my way up to the bar. Casey, the relief bartender, was on duty while Chico was in the back doing inventory, so after she gave me a beer, I headed to the stockroom. The room back there must have been part of the original Masonic Lodge, at least judging by the early 20th century floral wallpaper that still hung in strips where the wall was visible. Now, most of it was covered by shelving racks, and although one side was taken up with freezers full of bar food, the rest of it was stacked with bottles. It was actually pretty fascinating, all the different bottles that booze came in. Different shapes, different colored glass, with the one common factor that enough of what was inside would get you blotto. In previous days, I would have happily pulled down a couple of the more esoteric ones for a test drive, but I was here on business. My own business, but business nonetheless. I didn't see any immediate sign of Chico, so I called his name. He stood up, wearing an apron with a bunch of pockets, looking like the sweetest Susie Homemaker in maximum security prison. He glared as if he wasn't thrilled to see me. I sometimes wondered if Chico and Alice from the office were secretly married, or at least long-separated siblings. "Hey, Dollar, what you want?" "Just a few minutes of your charming personality, which will give me the courage to make it through another gray day." "Hey, guess what? Fuck you." I love Chico. He's the nicest angel I've ever met who doesn't like anything or anybody. Except customers, and that's only for their money. Other than that, he really hates them. Since he can bend an iron pipe in his bare hands and is a pretty fair shot, too, I can't help wondering sometimes what very peculiar branch of heaven spawned our bartender. Maybe that was the secret. Maybe he and Alice had both come out of the same Counter-Strike unit. "Right back at you, big boy. Actually, I need a favor." "Needing and getting." "You know those silver salts you use in your shotgun?" He looked at me as though I was standing on his foot and hadn't figured it out yet. "Yeah?" "Where did you find them?" He shrugged and turned back to his inventory. "Friend of a friend? You know." "Do you think your friend could get me some?" "It's just silver nitrate powder. You can buy that shit on the internet. How much do you need?" I don't know. 50, 100 pounds? He laughed harshly. "Shit, dude, that's going to set you back $20,000 or something. It's fucking silver. You going big game hunting in hell?" It would have been funnier if I hadn't just got back a few weeks earlier. No, man, but I got an idea I want to try." "Wait, don't tell me about it. It's bad enough that you brought that big demonic motherfucker here and tore up my bar, man. I don't want to lose my license because of you're doing some crazy shit." At least I knew where to start. Maybe Orban could get me some kind of weapons of mass destruction discount on the stuff. Cool, man, cool. Don't worry, I wasn't even here. Thanks for the advice. Hey, wait a second, he said as I reached the door. He slid a couple of bottles back into his shelf and stood up. I almost forgot. I got something for you. Just for me? It's a bit early for Valentine's Day, Chico. It's not even Christmas, but I'm touched. You know why I like you, Dollar? He said as he led me across the storage room and into the boxy little cubicle he uses as the compass's office. Why? Trick question. I don't. He reached in and picked something off the desk, handed it to me. It was a sealed envelope with my name on it, my earthbound name. Some guy in a suit left it for you. Asked when you be coming in next. I told him if it was up to me, not for years. I looked at the letter. I didn't know what it was, but I already didn't like it. Are you really still pissed about that Sumerian monster wrecking the bar? It was Sam's idea to come here, not mine. 2 assholes, 1 brain. Chico led me out of the cubicle. Don't trust either of you. Back in the bar, I finished my beer and decided I could allow myself one more. I had a quick catch-up with Jimmy the Table, who wanted me to come in for the next Friday night poker game, now being changed to Thursday nights, although it was still apparently going to be called the Friday night poker game, but I begged off. We never see you anymore, Bobby, he said sadly. Sam either. You guys find some new place to hang out? Don't know about Sam, but I prefer to drink at home with my stereo, my collection of great books, and the 2 oversexed Ukrainian girls who live with me. Kidder, he said. Well, don't be a stranger. No more than usual. I leaned in and gave Monica a kiss on the cheek, thumped Teddy Nebraska on the shoulder in a comradely way, because I seemed to make him nervous and I kind of enjoyed it, and then wandered out. I really wanted to open the letter, but I thought I should be a bit discreet. Half of what I was up to these days needed to be kept secret from heaven, so the middle of the most popular angel bar in San Judas might not be the best place to read my mail. The rain had slacked a bit, but I was still cold and wet when I reached my car. The good thing was it was now a lot easier to see if I was being tailed through the nearly deserted streets. Still, I drove a circuitous route out of downtown, just to be on the safe side, keeping my eye on the rearview mirror, but I didn't see anyone tailing me. I stopped to pick up a few sandwiches at a deli I like. I didn't really know what Amazons ate, although so far the answer seemed to be everything that isn't nailed down, so I just took my best shot. Then I headed back to Kaz's place. It occurred to me as I pulled into the secure garage that since I'd sent a message back to Kaz, or tried to, I was hoping to hear from her again. The problem was I'd moved since the Nizik found me, and the new place didn't have windows, so I'd have a hard time knowing when it found me again. Something else I'd have to think about. To my absolute lack of astonishment, Helena and Oksana were watching television when I got there, one of those horrible reality things where the host confronts people over paternity and infidelity. They seemed to be enjoying it, so I dumped several of the sandwiches onto a plate and slid it in front of them. When is something going to happen, Mr. Bobby Dollar? Helena asked, but I noticed she didn't take her eyes off the sleazy boyfriend who was shouting back at the studio audience, You don't know nothing about it. You don't know nothing. This man crazy, said Oksana, amused as only the young can be to find out how stupid lots of people are. No, really, we want to help you, Helena said. When can we help you? Sooner than you'd like, probably, so enjoy the time off. I took a pair of rubber gloves out from under the kitchen sink, then went to Kaz's desk where the light was better. Most of the lamps in the main room were hidden behind gauzy draperies so that the place looked more than a little like a bordello. I'd been a bit taken aback the first time I saw it until I'd realized that Kaz, however sophisticated she'd become over the course of several hundred years of afterlife, was still at heart a medieval girl. She had probably dreamed of living somewhere like this when she was young. Some idea of Moorish luxury that would have been quite different from her cold home in Poland. Once I had the gloves on, I checked the envelope again. But it hadn't been mailed, so there wasn't much information to be had. Only my name, Mr. Robert Dollar, which was actually kind of funny, written on the outside in felt pen. The inside was different, if only because the paper was a fancy business letterhead, embossed with a familiar symbol. And that's the sun wheel, the black sun symbol. Dear Mr. Dollar, it read, clearly printed from a computer document in so very 1990s Helvetica 14. It has come to my attention that a truly unfortunate error has been made by some of my employees invading your privacy. I assure you that I personally would never have allowed it, and that when I heard that matters had gone so far as a physical encounter between you and my overzealous subordinates, I disciplined those responsible. We are not enemies, Mr. Dollar, and we should not be enemies. I hope I can prove that to you. In fact, we have many goals in common, and my organization could be helpful to you in reaching yours. I would very much appreciate a chance to discuss this and other matters with you. Please come to my office on Friday at 1500 hours and let me explain. I apologize for the unusual way of communicating with you, but you seem to have changed your address, and I had no other way to reach you. If, for any reason, you cannot make Friday's appointment, please call, and I will be happy to set a new one. It is important that we speak, and important that we have no further misunderstandings. Sincerely, Baldur von Reinmann, Regional Director, Sonnenrad.org. There was even an address, 378 Centennial Avenue, San Judas, California, 90460. Right in downtown, convenient to stores and large coliseums, suitable for torchlight rallies. I couldn't help it. I laughed as I read it. Physical encounter. Herr von Reinmann must have been referring to his hired strong-arm guy beating the almost literal holy shit out of me. But it had all been a misunderstanding, of course. We could work together, me and the Nazis. I would find them very helpful. Yeah, I said, just like Poland did. I jotted down the address and time, but didn't bother hanging on to the letter, since other than humor value, it wasn't going to give me anything else useful. I got the pastrami sandwich I'd bought for myself, reheated some of the morning's coffee, and sat down to eat. By the time I was cleaning crumbs off the table, I decided that the black sun creeps were too dangerous to be ignored, especially if they had supernatural monstrosities like the Nightmare Children at their disposal. I needed to understand better how they fit into the whole Eligor, Anaita, Featherhorn, Mishigas. The quickest way to learn that would be simply to accept their invitation. That night, I made a laundry list of the things I was going to need before visiting Baldur and the Blitzkrieg boys. The Amazons had retired to bed to practice their horizontal calisthenics. So when I'd finished the list, I took a beer and went out into the courtyard of the apartment complex to stretch my legs. There were lights on in a few of the other apartment windows, but so far I hadn't seen any of the neighbors. That made sense, of course. Kaz would have picked a spot for her pied-à-terre where she wouldn't have to come into contact with others very often. But since I now knew I'd had neo-Nazis practicing black magic above me for weeks in the old apartment, I wondered if I was being too casual about who might be sharing these new digs. I stayed out for almost an hour. The storm had swept through, but the chilly air hadn't. It was pretty cold even for an angel, but I was determined to give a messenger from Kaz a chance to find me, and the Nizik had seemed to make all its visits after dark. But my only company at this hour was a dog, somewhere down the street, who barked loudly and hoarsely over and over until he gave up in strangled despair, only to start again a few minutes later, protesting the stupidity of a world where the humans got to sleep inside and be safe and comfortable while he was outside in the cold. "I know that feel, bro," I told the dog. then finished my beer and went back inside. Chapter 17. Shh. Thursday was a library day for me. I intended to put in a good few hours, so I gave the Amazons a map of the places where I needed things picked up and had them drop me off on Middlefield Street on the outskirts of downtown Jude. Helena could drive all right, but I doubted she had a license, and based on the trip out, I sure as hell wouldn't have let her drive my late lamented Matador. Both women were dressed a bit more soberly today, at my direction, because the last thing I wanted was to have some more of the dangerous supplies picked up by people who looked like they belonged to an anarchist cell. In fact, the Amazons now looked like a couple of teachers, which was the way I wanted it. Harmless. Professional, I told them as I got out. If you have any problems, just call me, but be professional. You too much worrying, Oksana reassured me. We will shoot nobody. The Harper Library downtown had once been San Judas's first fire station and still showed its historic roots in the high ceilings and the arches along the facade, which had allowed room for fully loaded hook and ladder trucks to drive out at speed. But a lot had changed in 70 or 80 years. If the brick walls and the Spanish tile roof still looked much the same, the insides were completely different from anything the older citizens would recognize. 20 years or so before, about the time I first arrived in San Judas, the city had rebuilt the whole thing, gutting the inside, putting in more windows and expanding outward to the back, including a large garden full of winding paths and benches. Like most libraries, it now had extensive multimedia resources, computers and video watching rooms and all sorts of other fancy stuff meant to lure in Jude's jaded, interneted youth. To me, it always seemed a bit like trying to get people to eat their good old healthy lima beans by offering artisan burgers, too. But I'm not a library professional, so what do I know? In fact, I'd only been to the Harper Library at all recently because of business. The head librarian had died at her desk, probably as she would have chosen, and I had a very interesting time seeing her through her judgment. I'll tell you about that one someday. Anyway, I had genuine work to do this time, so I settled in with one of the catalog computers and began seeing what I could find on Doña Sapanta. I checked on the other couple of names too, just to be careful, though I was pretty sure that Sapanta was the one. I kept the reference folks busy bringing me old magazines that hadn't been digitized and lots of newspapers in screen-ready form and the old-fashioned crackly kind. After half an hour, I gave up on the other names and really focused on the Sapanta woman, doing my best to assemble a biography. Considering that she was a major player in the city, especially in the Persian-American community, and very much alive and living only a few miles away, it turned out to be pretty damned hard work. Despite conflicting information, everyone seemed to think she'd been born in the early 1950s. I found 52, 53, and 55 listed in various who's who lists and in those little automated bios that pop up on the screen, primarily as an excuse to rub more advertising against your forebrain. But they all agreed that she was born in Hamadan, which rang a few bells with me and turned out to be a contemporary city of about 500,000 in the northwest of Iran. More interestingly, though, it was built on the ruins of Ekbatana, original capital of the ancient Median Empire and one of the oldest cities in the world. Her years in Iran were difficult to trace, again because stories conflicted or just left things out, but most of the capsule biographies agreed that her parents had been wealthy, that they'd spent a lot of their time in Europe and America, and that they left Iran for good after the 1979 revolution. Strangely, I couldn't find any other mention of those parents, or their names, or what happened to them. Well, strangely, if they were real, because their daughter, Doña, began to leave a fairly large track in the public record starting in the middle of the 1980s, when she moved from Southern California to little old San Judas. Since then, she had been involved in numerous charity benefits for the creation of community parks and buildings, and was listed as a donor for nearly every single project of any significance to the Persian American community. She had long supported the resistance to the rule of the Ayatollahs in contemporary Iran and had been listed as one of the backers for the Shah's son, but, according to one article in a Persian language newspaper, had fallen out with Reza Pahlavi's camp over their unwillingness to criticize militant Islam itself. So, she didn't like the new religion. New to her, anyway, if she was indeed Anaita. The more I studied, the more Ms. Sapanta seemed to fit. What made me feel almost certain was her unwillingness to be photographed. In picture after picture, she was represented only by stand-ins, generally board members of the Sapanta Foundation, her main charity. But everyone who spoke about her personally seemed to mention her beauty and grace as well as her generosity. I'm not saying there's no such thing as shy philanthropists, but the personal touch helps a lot with fundraising, I'm told. The desire of the hoi polloi to mix with the important and the glamorous. So it felt at least slightly out of character for the life Doña Sapanta lived. Also, though the fact itself was not given much attention, there was no mention anywhere of her having a family of her own, only her long-gone, largely anonymous parents. Almost certain I had cracked it, I started looking for anything that might tell me where to find her. But beyond near constant hometown boosterism in the local papers, which usually referred to her as, quote, one of San Judas's leading citizens, I couldn't find much of anything. A few articles suggested she might live in the hills. One article mentioned the Los Altos district, another Woodside, without ever going so far as to say she actually lived there. And based on many mentions of her, quote, frequent travel and worldwide circle of influential friends, unquote, she wasn't even at home very much. I looked up and realized it was getting dark outside. I was just about to pack it in when I stumbled across something very, very interesting in one of the last pieces I'd requested, an old issue of Sunset magazine, believe it or not. For those of you who've never lived in California, Sunset was originally a travel magazine for Southern Pacific Railroad, but it outlived that long ago and is still going strong. It's a travel, home, and cooking magazine that appeals particularly to the upscale and those who would like to live that way. If you want to know how to make a perfect crab cioppino for 8 people and how to serve it outdoors in your garden pergola on a summer evening while surrounded by the twinkling light of dozens of Mexican luminaria, well, Sunset's your bet. And there, to my astonishment, in the June 1988 issue, between articles on pattern-punching aluminum cabinets, tapas bars, still fairly new back then, and managing an extensive garden during drought, a frequent California worry, I found an article titled A Persian Oasis in the California Hills. And the oasis garden in question belonged to, yes, none other than Bay Area socialite and philanthropist Doña Sapanta. I leafed through the article eagerly, not so much admiring the images of the garden, its low walls and pools, cypresses and fruit trees, but looking for a picture of the elusive Doña. I found one, but it was only of her shoulder and hand as she held a pomegranate for the camera. She had a perfectly nice, prettily manicured hand, but that told me almost nothing. A quick read didn't add anything else useful. A lot of information about Persian-styled gardens, but nothing else about Ms. Sapanta except for a few references to, quote, her view from the rolling California hills and, quote, looking down on the golden Santa Clara Valley, which is what they used to call the area before it became known primarily for silicon-related reasons. But just as I was going to give up and go meet the Amazons, one of the smaller pictures in the article caught my eye. It showed a group of square ornamental pools that had been built at the front of the house. Its caption mentioned looking down on Santa Clara Valley. And right down in the corner of the picture, Beyond most of the roads and greenery filling the space between the nearest pool and the distant bay, a little white finger poked up above the trees, like a shy person trying to summon a waiter. It was Hoover Tower, at the heart of the Stanford campus. More importantly, it was a landmark with 4 sides and thus an orientation to the compass. I emailed the image to myself in the largest format I could find, then went over to the train depot to meet my ride. The women were in a boisterous mood. "We get everything," said Halina. She was squinting, leaning so far forward as she drove that her nose was almost against the inside of the windshield. I guess I should have asked her if she was supposed to wear corrective lenses before giving her my keys, but it was too late now. "Everything. No problem." "No, one problem. Packages plus guy," Oksana reported cheerfully. Her English was improving, but I still had to work to make out what she was saying sometimes. "He make face, don't want to give silver powder. Your name not on this, he say. This say Robert Dollar, you not Robert Dollar." But Halina tell him, "Just because we not Americans don't mean we not work for American." "He's always careful," I said. "That's why I keep a mailbox there. I gave you a note. Didn't you show it to him?" "I told you," Halina said to Oksana. "I say to her, 'Where is note? Bobby, give us note.' But she tell me, 'No, you didn't.'" "I forgot." Oksana shrugged and looked guilty. "Leave it in other clothes." "It's okay," I said. "I see the stuff here, so he must have given it to you." After a while," Oksana said, then brightened. "Halina said, 'Give it or Mr. Dollar will angry. Plus, I pinch you in the nose.'" "Punch," said Halina, indignant. "Word is punch." I rolled my eyes. I was going to have to go in and mend fences at Packages Plus, I could see. "And we buy this at store. But why you need sugar, Bobby?" Oksana passed me a family-sized bag of C&H granular. "You make some cake?" "Ha ha," I said. "Yes, I'm going to do a little cooking. I have an important meeting tomorrow, and I'd like to take some treats." I hadn't told them about my invitation to meet von Reinman and his Black Sun buddies yet, so I outlined it in quick strokes. Halina was so upset she pulled the car over to the shoulder right on the Woodside Expressway, which even in the middle of the afternoon, an hour before the commute really got going, was still a bad idea. Horns blasted as the drivers behind us had to press themselves all the way over to the driver's side of the lane to get by. "You don't do that. You don't go alone. They are killers." "Just get back on the road, please," I said. "I know what I'm doing. People have been trying to kill me since you were in kindergarten. You may notice that I'm still here. But you don't know these men, the Black Sun. They are very, very bad. They have powers." "Hey, a lot of the folks who hate me aren't even human," I said, but I didn't make a point of it. I was pretty sure the Amazon still didn't know I was anything other than another mortal dude, and if I was lucky, Ballsack von Rybred and his little group didn't know either. I know it seems like my secret identity is secret to no one, but that's because most of the people I hang out with already know. The rest of the folks in San Judas who know me think I'm an ordinary guy who just gets into slightly extraordinary situations from time to time. For some reason, the Amazons thought me cooking in my boxer shorts was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. "Look, I'm not just doing this to give you a thrill, ladies. I'm working with some very nasty stuff here, and I only have so many decent pairs of pants." "No, it's good," said Oksana. "You have very nice leg." "Legs," Halina corrected her. "He has 2. "Maybe she only likes one of them," I suggested. "Hand me that little plastic jar over there, will you?" While I was stirring, I asked the Amazons to put on some music. Oksana chose. After about 90 seconds of the ghastly Europop dance music had jolted my brain like badly administered electroshock, I put down my spoon and changed it for something that worked a bit better with precision and potentially explosive chemicals, in this case Nina Simone's first album, Little Girl Blue. "You are old," said Oksana. "Oh, he's nice," Halina said, listening. "She has a lot of person in her voice." "Absolutely right," I said. "You have that pair of shoes?" "Why you want shoes," Halina said, "and so boring shoes." "Because I wouldn't do this to a pair I wanted to keep." I took a black Oxford out of the box and examined the heel. Hard rubber. Perfect. It had to take enough shock to let me walk in it, without being so resilient that it wouldn't do the job. I took a little fine-grained sandpaper and started scuffing up the polish, just a bit. After all, anybody who knows anything about me would be suspicious if I showed up with shiny shoes or, highest forbid, wearing a tie. Most places I hang out, a tie would get me shot as an imposter. By the time I'd finished the rest of my preparations, Central Park Blues was tiptoeing through the speakers and the Amazons had given up and gone to bed. I finished the cleanup, set everything carefully aside to dry or harden or whatever, then made myself a real drink. Considering I hadn't set Kaz's apartment on fire or lost any fingers with my chemistry experiments, I figured I'd earned it. I left the hood fan running on the range to clear any fumes, since the place had no windows, and went into the bathroom, where I locked the door, took off my watch, and practiced opening a zipper, then timing the difference between how long it felt like in the no-time bubble and how long it actually was. No, that's not a euphemism for anything. Because soon it was going to be in my best interest to be able to judge how much time was passing in the real world while I was outside. The rains had ended, so I walked out into the courtyard, clinking ice in my glass and trying not to think too much about the first night I'd been here with Kaz, because that hurt too badly. I sometimes thought it would be better if one or both of us had died, because at least there would have been an end of sorts. Instead, we were stuck in this netherworld. For Kaz, literally. For me, only figuratively. And although I knew that what I was doing now was my only chance to ever get her back, sometimes I felt like I couldn't wait any longer. That at some point I was going to start shouting and punching things, and that would go on until someone tasered me and hauled me off to a secure ward in Atascadero. But that wouldn't do Kaz any good at all. Had she even received my message? Why hadn't she sent one back? Maybe freezing and torturing a Nizik wasn't the best way to continue communication? How was I supposed to know? Flying booger demons don't come with instructions. Something whirred overhead, and I looked up, heart racing, but it was only some night bird passing. No message there, at least not one I was waiting for. 20 minutes or so drifted by, but I was still alone, just me and the smell of wet concrete and a few ice cubes rattling in the bottom of an empty glass. Chapter 18. Make friends and incinerate people. I was limping as I made my way along Centennial Avenue, but it was only a tactical limp. I saw my Datsun reach the corner and turn, heading back toward Ravenswood, the new paint job quite convincingly ratty after the recent hard use. I'd let the Amazons drive me because I didn't want to risk setting off the incendiary in the heel of my shoe, but I was damned if I was going to risk them getting hurt on this little scouting expedition, which was exactly the kind of stupid, probably unnecessary thing I do best by myself. Centennial had been a major thoroughfare back in the 1960s, but it had fallen on leaner times, and the big downtown rebuilding program of the mid-90s had just missed it by a couple of streets. It was wide, but it didn't look it because it was crammed with boxy multi-story buildings built at the beginning of the previous century. These days, people drove through it too fast, and although it was still a neighborhood where people lived, almost all the upper floors of even the more successful businesses were apartments. The gloominess, wide streets, and fast traffic tended to keep even local pedestrians moving quickly. Not to mention the less pleasant elements of street life, which were to be found on Centennial in profusion, as some guy on public television might say. The intersection of Centennial and Industrial, a few blocks down, was one of the best places in Jude to find hookers and drugs at pretty much any hour of the day. Here, a little west of Sendustrial, as some of the locals called it, things weren't quite so grim, but they hadn't exactly caught the wave of gentrification either. The downstairs businesses were mostly small taquerias, Asian food joints, dry cleaners, and nail salons. The kind of establishments you find in strip malls out in the suburbs. Number 378 was a big sandy gray building of about the same vintage as the rest of the street, but a floor or so higher than its neighbors. It was also a bit more upscale than the rest of the block, with 3 entrances on the bottom floor, one for a doctor's office, one for an accounting business, and one with Sonnenrad Communications written in gold paint on the glass. I pushed that one open and went in. There was no one inside, just a kind of sad little waiting room with a table and some magazines. Nothing particularly neo-Nazi, I feel honor-bound to report, but I guess you don't want to leave copies of Genocide Illustrated out for the UPS guy to see. A laser-printed sign taped to the wall said the reception desk was 1 floor above, so I limped carefully up the stairs to a smaller room. The receptionist was about 25 and as blonde as one of the German schoolgirls out of Triumph of the Will. Her accent, though, was strictly San Judas. "Can I help you?" "I have an appointment. My name is Dollar." She nodded, punched a button, announced me into her headset, then said, "Someone will be right out," before turning back to whatever important work she was doing for the good of the race, which seemed to be reading Us magazine. After a few seconds, one of the bastards I'd caught in my apartment, the dark-haired missionary I'd named Timon, opened the inner door and beckoned me in. As I entered, Pumbaa, his blond, slightly stockier buddy, stepped in on the other side of me. "Herr von Reinman is waiting for you," said Timon, stiff as your first slow dance chubby. "We're very sorry about the misunderstanding of the other day." I wasn't going to waste a lot of energy on pretend courtesy. "Let's get on with this." We went up another flight of stairs. Then Timon knocked on a door about halfway down the hall before showing me in. The room had clearly once been a very nice office, a lawyer's practice, or even an old-fashioned medical consulting room, though the faded wallpaper was at odds with the modernist furniture. One big window, crisscrossed with wrought iron bars, took up a lot of the northeastern side. Across the wide room from me, behind a big oak desk, sat a man of about 30, with pale skin and black hair. His hair was military short, like that of my escorts, nearly shaved to the scalp, but unlike Timon and Pumbaa, he had a full, thick beard. He looked less like a stereotyped neo-Nazi than I'd expected, more like Abe Lincoln in the middle of a lice epidemic. This was emphasized when he stood up because he was also quite tall, nearly 6.5 feet, with long arms and long hands. "Mr. Dollar!" He had a slight but definite Scandinavian accent. "So kind of you to come. Again, many apologies for my colleagues' mistakes. The guilty have been disciplined, I promise you." It didn't look to me like either of my 2 escorts were suffering too badly, but I only nodded. "And you must be Baldur von Reinman." He smiled as if I had recognized him in public and asked for an autograph. "I am, yes, and we have much to speak about. But first, please forgive me. My colleagues must—" He made a gesture of regret. "Well, let us be honest. They must search you for weapons. I have many enemies, and you and I have not yet established our friendship." I shrugged and let them pat me down. One of them found my FN automatic, withdrew it with careful fingers, and set it down on the desk. The other one found my sleeve knife, but missed the second blade, which was down my collar at the back. Ever the good sport, I told them, then passed it to yellow-haired Pumbaa. Von Reinman frowned. Thomas, you are hasty in your search. He set the pistol and the two knives off to one side of his desk, well out of my reach. Now search again. This time they found the third knife, a very small one built into my belt buckle, more of a punch blade, really, and eventually they even noticed the lead rod sewed into my sleeve. Instead of having them pick my jacket apart, I just took it off and tossed it to von Reinman, who folded it neatly and put it on top of everything else. Thomas, a.k.a. Pumbaa, brought me a chair and set it in front of the desk. Then he and the brown-haired guy stood on either side of me while I sat down. Can I offer you something? No, thanks, I said. I just had lunch with my daughter before I came. I watched the bearded man's response, but he only nodded, which made me very happy. I had invented a daughter not just to explain away the Amazons if someone saw them drop me off, but more to see if the Black Sun faction knew I was an angel. No reaction meant probably don't know, which would make things way more likely to work out in my favor. Now I had to sit through about 5 minutes of Baldur von bullshit explaining to me how his men had totally misunderstood his directions to make contact with me, and had then even taken their foolish surveillance of me further still into that, his words, so regrettable physical conflict. You mean beating me until I was coughing blood? He waggled his hand at these sad but minor details. As I have said, Mr. Dollar, we can only regret the error, but we have taken great pains to make sure such a thing does not happen again. Really? I may be wrong, but two of the guys are standing right here breathing down my neck, and neither one of them seems to have had his legs broken. BVW smiled with real pleasure, and for the first time, I was worried. I mean, he was happy I brought that up. I remembered what the Amazons had said. These people were dangerous. Oh, but they were only along to help. It was the so-called professional we hired who botched this so badly. Bald thug, he meant. So they were going to fob it all off on him. What was the point? He isn't around. Too bad. He's escaped somewhere, whatever they were going to say. Why even bring it up? Well, he seemed pretty certain his job was to restructure my face. Terrible, terrible. But don't worry. We have taken care of it. BVW opened the laptop on the desk in front of him, the biggest monitor you could get and still carry it onto a plane, then turned it around toward me. Watch. You will see. For a moment there was only a blur of light and shadow on the screen. Then the image regularized itself, and I could see a man lying on his side on what seemed to be oily concrete, caught in a pool of light. No, not lying exactly, but sort of kneeling with his hands apparently tied behind his back. Someone was holding his head down against the floor. I could see enough of the kneeling man's face to recognize Bald Thug, and my nose sent me a nostalgic twinge of pain. Bald Thug was talking, but the volume was off, and I couldn't hear a thing he was saying. Okay, yeah, there's your boy. What, did you spank him for me? Watch. A moment later, the figure that had been holding down B-Thug's head leaned in so I could see the rest of him. It wasn't possible to say for sure because the new figure was wearing a ski mask, but it might have been von Reinman himself. The ski mask guy brought out a long, wide-bladed dagger and displayed it to the camera. I could tell by the shape what it was, and although I couldn't read the etching on the blade in the dim light where they'd filmed, I already knew what it said. Meine Ehre heißt treu. My honor called loyalty, roughly, which was just inscribed on all the Nazi SS daggers of that kind. I almost made a remark about collecting the whole set or something, but then a couple of other dark figures leaned in to hold Bald Thug more firmly, and the one with the dagger began sawing at his neck. And that is where we are going to stop, because then all the actiony stuff starts happening. And I'm afraid we will have to wait for next week for all that actiony stuff. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you all so much, as always, for joining me. It's a huge pleasure to share time with you. And I am always grateful that, as I said last night, anybody wants to listen to me at all, because otherwise I'd just be down here talking to myself. With all of that said, I also want to mention that you all should take good care of yourselves, because that's very important. And take care of those you love, your friends and family, whatever kind of family it is, because there are many, many kinds. And also keep an eye out for people around you who might need a helping hand, a smile, a kind word, or just an ear. I don't mean like literally an entire ear. I mean like, might want to be, excuse me, listened to. And with that, I say, again, thank you, peace, have a good rest of your Sunday, wherever you might be, and I will talk to you again next week. So thank you for joining me, and ciao ragazzi.